Okay, welcome everybody. I will moderate this lecture because there will be two persons engaged. First, we have Lars Hylander, who will talk about water use and management. The first half hour, then we will have a 10-minute break, and after that, we'll discuss some questions that Lars will pose to you. After this discussion, we'll have a short continuation of Lars. And then in the end, Abror Gaday will speak a bit about irrigation and water efficiency in Uzbekistan, if I'm correctly informed. So now I hand the floor to Lars. And probably because we have went over like 15 minutes, we will need to push on and use another 15 minutes in the end of the lecture. So we'll end only in 1.5 hours from now. Please, Lars, go ahead.
Thanks. Can you see the presentation now, or should I do something?
Yeah.
You see it?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, welcome. Sorry for the delay. I'll talk about water use and management, agriculture and sanitation. And I have thought about the following disposition. To some basics for cultivation, some basics for sanitation, and then some basics for irrigation, and then short conclusions at the end. And the human needs resembles the needs of plants. They are also respiring and are using energy as sources when it is dark. But in sunshine, the plants can produce new energy storages as sugar, starch, etc. And this they are doing via photosynthesis. And this all green plants can do. And it's a big difference between humans or animals and plants. And the photosynthesis, it's capturing carbon dioxide from the air, adding it with water, combining it with the help of sunlight into sugar, C6H12O6, and oxygen. So as a byproduct, we should use this term, we get oxygen into the air. And that's why we say that it's refreshing with the plants. The planet is really needing plants, otherwise we shouldn't have any oxygen and in there. And the basics for growing, it's to get nutrients such as nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, and water, large amounts of water, in fact. Certainly the plants also need carbon dioxide, but this the plants will access freely from the air. And in fact, it's too much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere nowadays, as you have heard about the greenhouse gas problems. So what is nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium then? It's the three main nutrients which the plants need. And we find them in many places. We can start looking at this schedule of the elements, periodic system. And there we have nitrogen as the 7th, we have phosphorus as the 15th, and we have potassium as the 19th element. And we find the phosphorus in the our heritage, the codes determining how we will look like, how we will grow, and so on. If we will be a boy or female. So it's in the DNA and in the RNA. We have it also for what you call it, for the energy processes in the body. as an adenine triphosphate, ATP, it's shorted, and ADP, adenine diphosphate. We have it in phospholipids, in the cell walls. We have it in the teeth and in bones as building up the calcium phosphate in the bones and the teeth. And nitrogen, we have mainly in the air. 80% of the air is just nitrogen. And then there's little oxygen and carbon, very little carbon dioxide, and some very minute amounts of some other gases. And we have nitrogen also in the heritage codes, DNA and the RNA. We have it in amino acids, and amino acids is the keystone to build up proteins. We have it much in beans, in peas, milk, and in our muscles, of course. And potassium we have in liquids. It's an electrolyte for balancing the cell functions and so on. And it's important to keep it in with the membranes. So it's getting not too little, not too high potassium content in the cells. We have it in muscles and in nerves. And nitrogen is widely used, nitrogen is widely used in fertilizers, also in explosives. Dynamite, I suppose you have heard about, and it's used for both construction and for wars. So it's both good and bad uses of it. Phosphorus is widely used in fertilizers because plants need so much of it. And we have it in detergents, in pesticides, also in Coca-Cola, which is based on phosphoric acid. Potassium is widely used in fertilizers also because we need it so much in plant production. It's also used in soaps and in many salts, potassium chloride, potassium nitrate, and so on. And also in match heads for getting light on a match. A perfect fertilizer is in fact urine. It has large content of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And this is exactly what the plants need in large amounts. So it's perfect to collect urine from the toilets and use it as fertilizer straight away as it is. We call it gold water in Sweden. And it's really gold worth for your plants. And there's without any poisons. Many of the chemical fertilizers may contain poisons such as cadmium, which is a toxic, very toxic heavy metal. But you never have this in urine, because our rinse we have in the body, it's an organ which is perfect for cleaning the urine. So it's totally free from heavy metals and toxic compounds. But just adding fertilizers such as urine to the soil may result in that water-soluble nutrients are leached away when it's raining, or if we are irrigating too much. And this can be counteracted by adding charcoal. It's also called biochar. You can also use organic materials for keeping the nutrients in the sandy soils. If you have clayey soils, there's so much colloids, it's called, small particles in the soil which attract the nutrients such as phosphorus and potassium, so it's not leached away so easy in clay soils. But in sand soils, it's a challenge to keep it in the soil. And charcoal or biochar, it's charred wood, which is persistent against degradation. So because of this, it will remain in the soil for thousands of years. And it's a very safe carbon sink. So it's a very good idea to produce biochar or charcoal from vegetation and then put it into the soil. It's much better than burning the firewood to just get energy out of it. If you are charring the firewood, for example, then you get about half of the energy content out as energy heat, and the other part will be left as charcoal, which is very useful, profitable for the plant growth and for agriculture, horticulture, for all growing. Why is biochar so good to use then? Well, it's mycel, fungus, and plant roots. They love biochar because they find small sort of storage places in it. It's a lot of holes in it, and in those holes there's water with sold nutrients such as nitrate, ammonia, or phosphate, or potassium ions. And this the Indians noticed in South America 1,000 years ago, and it's they fabricated charcoal and added it to the soil, and the soil got black because of the black charcoal, and now the soil is called Therapeutic, black soil in Portuguese. And here we see the secret of why the charcoal is holding so much water and nutrients. There's lots of small holes, pores, which are getting created during the high temperature when the tar and the some other substances are getting burnt away, but the cell walls remain, and they make a lot of small chambers here. It's similar with the honeycomb, and it's very useful for the plants for supplying nutrients and water. And you can add biochar to compost for reducing emissions and losses of nitrogen. The plants need much nitrogen, much nutrients. So this is a good way to reduce nitrogen emissions and keep the nitrogen in the circulation in horticulture, or in forestry, horticulture, agriculture. And then we'll have a look on sustainable sanitation. We, as I said, we are producing a lot of urine, feces, with a lot of nutrients. And this should, if possible, go back into plant production. In a sustainable society, it must go back to plant production. Otherwise, we are getting the nutrients out from the soil, and we are doing the soil very poor and infertile. So the best way to recycle the nutrients is just dry toilets. They are recovering 99% of all plant nutrients we are eating. And sometimes they can smell a bit, and that's important to have good ventilation, with a chimney ending up in the fresh air above the roof, and also add separation of urine, because it's normally the urine which creates bad smell, odors. And if you have a dry compost or dry toilet without too much urine, then it's very minimal smells. So you can separate the urine with diverting the urine to a special tank, and then you use the urine as a liquid fertilizer, and the feces you leave in the big compost tank and use it as solid fertilizer. And you can do urine separation in different way. Easiest is to just collect it in a tin below the sink. You can also have a special toilets, and you have portable urinals for women, if which is facilitating the urine separating for women. And there are many fabricates of composting toilets. You can have a look on these websites after the presentation. And why should we use a dry toilet system then? Firstly, the toilet we need, the sanitation we need to hinder spreading of infections from the toilet waste. And just flushing away the feces with the water in a water closet, it really doesn't hinders the spreading of infections, rather the contrary. But if we have the feces, urine collected separately, then the infections and bacteria and so on will not be spread. And the heat in the composting system will destroy the bacteria, and the chemicals also in the urine, or the natural chemical processes in the urine will increase the pH, and with the increased pH, bacteria will be killed. So it's urine is the most safe for using in a cultivation system. You just need to store it for a short time, and then the pH is getting so high that all dangerous bacteria and so on are getting killed. And there's toilets where you can separate the feces from the urine straight away in the porcelain chair, and it's to recommend at new installations. If you are using AVC, the wastewater needs to be cleaned. If it's just let out into a river or lake, then you get spreading of infections. And you can clean it in sort of treated filters, either in the natural soil, or you use chopped wood, build a wood filter, or you construct a soil filter to clean the water. Soil is very efficient in cleaning wastewater, in fact. Problem in large scale is that you get so large quantities of wastewater, such as in big cities. And that's why you cannot use it for big cities. There you have artificial wastewater treatment plants. But for the spread living in the countryside, the soil and the local filters are the most efficient way to clean the wastewater. And here is how you can do it. Here they specialized on doing it with wood logs. You can use plastic tubes also. And here we see how the wastewater at the bottom of the well before entering the filter, and then after the filter, it got very good cleaned. It got very good reduction of both nitrogen, phosphorus, and organic matter and bacteria also. So biochar and nutrient recycling of toilet waste could benefit the RLC region, as I see it. Do you agree? And you could produce the biochar in by quite simple manners. You could just use one iron tin and make a hole here in the bottom. You fill it with wood, and then you put it in a bigger fire. And 50 minutes after the fire was lit, you see that it's a high temperature here in the fire, and the temperature is also high inside the tin. And through this small hole, gases, pyrolyzed gases, are pressed out through the hole, and then they are getting ignited and contribute to the heat in the fire or in the room or wherever you use the heat. And you should have the hole in the bottom of the tin. If you have it on the top, then everything will burn up. And if you don't have any hole at all, then the tin will explode when you put it in the heat in the fire. And then you can use this biochar for improving the soil. So I think I'll stop here now, and I have a few questions you could look at during the break. I think we should have a 20 minutes break now. Is it correct? And the questions
sorry, Lars, we have 10 minutes break.
Okay, sorry, 10 minutes. Then thanks for the correction, Bosse. And you could look on these questions, and then you'll present it after the break in groups from the different universities. And the first question is, can plants get COVID-19? Discuss similarities and differences between plants and humans. Which are the needs, health aspects, intoxication, and so on in general terms. And then a question which I have not talked about, but can water from the RLC be used for irrigation? And think you know what reverse osmosis is. In that case, you can talk about it. Otherwise, just think about if water from the RLC could be used for irrigation. And I will present more about it in the second part of the presentation. So see you after 10 minutes. Thanks. Then we will look at irrigation. And as Bosse said here, it's evaporation increase the salt content in the soil or in the water. And to reduce the evaporation, we'll look at some possible ways to reduce the evaporation. There's also different ways to irrigate. And if we have the open furrows, like in these pictures, we get very high evaporation. because the sunshine is shining on the water, and it's going up as vapor into the air, and maybe too little is left for good plant growth. In fact, we need to irrigate, supply much more water than the plant needs, because we must wash the soils from salt. Otherwise, it will be more and more salt with for every year we are irrigating. In some areas where we have a humid climate, such as in Sweden, for example, we have so much rain in the winter, so there's no problem of if you use ordinary water, there's no problem of salinization of the soils here. In some places, when we use with irrigate with water from the Baltic Sea, then we get problems with irrigation, with salinization. And that's why it's important to, if you use saline water, you should use much more than is needed for the plants to grow. So you wash away additional salt from the soil out into the, back to the Baltic Sea in our case. So there's different irrigation techniques, such as ditch or furrows, canals, which we saw in the earlier picture. And the positive aspect of those ditches and canals, it's that it's very low investment costs. You just dig up a canal. And the negative aspect is that it's inefficient use of water. It's most water is probably running back into the river without having passed the soil and being used by the plants or being used for cleaning up the soil, leaching out the salt from the soil. Then we can have sprayers of varying dimensions. They have very high investment costs, and they are also inefficient, using the water inefficient, especially when it's windy and sunny, because so much exposure of the water droplets to the warm air, and much is evaporating before it's ever coming down to the soil or to the plants. So it's more efficient to use drip irrigation. It's low to medium investment costs, and it gives very efficient use of water. Disadvantage is that it's a more complex management. You see an example here on a sort of nozzle on a plastic tube, often just 1-2 centimeters diameter of the plastic tubes. You put them out over the fields, and you have the nozzles or just punch a hole into the plastic hose at the places where you want water to get out into the onto the plants. So how can we then reduce the water use at irrigation? The main topic is, main aim is to reduce the evaporation. So you shouldn't irrigate when it's windy or sunny. If it's sunny every day, then try to irrigate in the winter, in the night, because then it's much less evaporation. And we could use plastic films, mulching, and so on, as evaporation barriers. We could create shadow and wind barriers, example by planting trees along the fields with 10, 20, 30 meters distances. So the wind is slowing down and not drying out the soil so much. We should have proper service and management of the equipment. Do you have any questions of this, or any questions, comments, something which is not clear?
Maybe Lars will have the questions and comments towards the end. If you can note, so if you have any questions, then we can get back to this.
Mm. So then,
was this?
Sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
The considerations we need to make is that it's necessary to apply more water than the plants need. This is very important. Large areas have been saline because the people has just irrigated so much water as the plants need. You can do it for 1, maybe 2 years, and then the plants cannot grow there any longer. And this is so that excess water can leach away salts from the soil to avoid salt deserts, as in the Aral Sea basin. Using wastewater for irrigation may be an option, but you need to be observant to pollutants and to high salt content. And the high salt content will burn green leaves. And in that aspect, it's a solution maybe to irrigate via the soil, for example, with drop irrigation systems with the hoses, just letting out the water at each plant. For example, large areas in dry areas have been planted with trees, and you have hoses with a small hole at each tree, letting out the water just at the tree and which is needing it, and you don't need to irrigate all soil between the rows of trees. So this is a smart way to economize and use the water more efficient. Often impressive memory I have from when I was down in Red Sea area in Negev desert. There they have put, it's a sandy desert, and they have are cultivating watermelons there. Watermelons need very much water. So they have reduced the evaporation by covering the soil with a plastic sheet. Then the soil is keeping moisture, and then they are building a tunnel of also plastic sheet on top of above all the plants. So then the evaporation from the plants itself is also reduced. So 2 layers of plastic films, one to reduce evaporation from the soil, the other to reduce the combined evaporation from plants and soils. So then I would like to make some conclusions that photosynthesis is the base for human life, and nature cannot be manipulated behind natural limits. And this is, Aral Sea is a good example of this, or a scaring example, I should say, that if you are pressing the natural borders too hard, then it's getting infertile soil. And there's a need to prioritize sustainability. And it means that we should be able to benefit from cultivation, from agriculture, fisheries, not the least, for not only for the moment, but also for the future, for generations to come. So we need to go for resource conserving technologies. And we need to go for robust systems, minimizing the need of rare or not available experts, expensive spares, and so on. And the irrigation systems with plastic tubes, it's of course they need some sort of industrial products, but it's much more resource conserving than canal irrigation or furrows irrigation. And this is a sort of technology which is easy to understand and maintain. So that's my conclusions for the presentation on agriculture and irrigation. Any questions?